We're going to use SOH to solve for missing pieces in triangles. First, I would start by writing SOH at the top of your paper. Make sure it's spelled correctly. And then I would label each side. So opposite is what the angle is pointing out to. Hypotenuse is the one across from the right angle or your diagonal line, and then adjacent is your other side. So if we're using the 40 degrees, we want to use the side that's opposite and adjacent. So out of these three, opposite and adjacent, that's TOA, which is tangent. So we can take tangent of 40, and you always take a tangent or sine or cosine of an angle, equals opposite over adjacent. So opposite is x, over adjacent is 20. We want to get x by itself, so we can multiply both sides by 20. So now x is going to equal 20 tangent of 40, and then you can plug that into the calculator. Just make sure that your calculator is in degree mode, so go to mode and then degree. And once you do that once, you shouldn't have to do that again. And when you plug that into the calculator, you end up getting 16.78. For the next one, I would also label your opposite, what the angle that you're given is pointing out to. Hypotenuse, that's the diagonal. This is the adjacent. We want to use these two sides. We only want one unknown, so the x is what we're going to solve for. So that's adjacent and hypotenuse sides, which is the cosine. Cosine of an angle, cosine of 50, equals adjacent x over hypotenuse 10. We want x by itself, so we multiply by 10 to both sides. So 10 cosine 50 equals x. Plug that into the calculator, you get 6.43. In this next example, it's asking us to solve for the angle. We want to find the measure of angle P. So we want to use both of these sides so that the angle is our unknown here. Let's label this is opposite, what it's pointing out to. This is hypotenuse, and that's adjacent. So we want to use the adjacent and the hypotenuse. Adjacent and hypotenuse is cosine. So the cosine of angle P, always of the angle, is adjacent over hypotenuse. Now we want to split apart the cosine from the P. We can't divide by cosine, but what we can do is inverse cosine both sides. And by doing that, the inverse cosine and cosine on the left cancel. So now P is going to equal the inverse cosine of 8 over 18. And all you have to do in the calculator is, instead of clicking on the cosine button, just click on second cosine, and that gives you inverse cosine. And then that should give you about 63.61. Here we want to solve for the measure of angle U. So we have opposite and hypotenuse, which is opposite and hypotenuse, that's sine. So the sine of the angle, sine of U, is 11 opposite over hypotenuse. Again, we need to inverse sine both sides to get rid of the sine on the left. And when you do that in the calculator, you get about 47.17 degrees.